Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the California High-Speed Rail Authority's Board of Directors meeting for March the 25th. If I can start, Mr. Secretary, will you please take the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Schenk?
Somewhere in cyberspace here.
Richards?
I'm with her.
Director Camacho?
Here.
Vice Chair Miller?
Here.
Assembly Member Rambula? Director Perea?
Here.
Director Guillemette?
Present.
Director Escutia?
Here.
Director Boutros?
Here.
Director Williams?
Here.
Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you. If we can bring up the flag, please. And if you'll repeat after me, I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the
of the
United States of
United
America
America
and to the
and to the
republic
republic for which it stands,
one
One
nation,
nation,
under God,
God,
indivisible.
indivisible, liberty
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And I'll now ask the secretary to let those of you in the public know how you can address us today. And after that, we will begin the agenda. So Mo, if you'll please provide the instructions to the people joining us from the public.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning and welcome to the California High-Speed Rail Board of Directors public meeting. Today, we are hosting this meeting via Zoom. In a moment, we will take public comment. First, we want to run through some important technical aspects of this meeting for offering public comment. If you are logged into this meeting via the Zoom application, please use the raise your hand feature typically located at the bottom of your screen so that I may call on you to provide your comment. If you're dialing in by phone, pressing #2 will raise your hand and put you into our queue. Speakers will be called in the order that their hand is raised. Once you've been in the queue and your name is called, in the web meeting, please click the prompt on your screen to allow your microphone to be unmuted. On the phone, we will call on you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. At that point, you'll hear a message that you are being unmuted. Once unmuted, it will be your turn to speak. Please slowly and clearly say and spell your first and last name, and if applicable, state the organization you represent. After your introduction, each speaker is allotted 2 minutes to provide comments. Our court reporter is on the line to record those comments. If they need you to spell or repeat something, they may interject. I will notify you when your time is nearly up. At the end of your comment, we will disable your microphone. However, you are welcome to stay on the line to continue watching or listening to the meeting. If you do not wish to provide comment and simply want to watch the meeting, you can do so by logging on to hsr.ca.gov and looking for the link to our live stream.
Thank you, Mo. And ladies and gentlemen, again, this is your opportunity to speak to us. So please don't be offended if you ask a question. Is not the policy of the board during this period to answer questions, but rather to listen to you. So Mo, we can begin, please, with public comment.
Mr. Chairman, we do have a few elected officials, and I'm just waiting to give them first priority. And it looks like we have first up a Matthew Serrato.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Good morning, everybody. Matthew Serrato, last name Serrato, Mayor, City of Merced. Good to see everybody again. And City of Merced supports the plan. We support Governor Newsom's vision and plan for high-speed rail. We, again, have strong support, too, for the region's RISE effort, which has brought together leaders from all over the valley and the state to address shared opportunities and challenges. High-speed rail, in particular, a commitment to clean, low-carbon transportation, big deal here in the Central Valley with the challenges we have related to air quality, asthma rates, those sort of things. And again, to strong support for the draft 2020 business plan. I apologize. From the City of Merced, which includes the Fresno, Merced, Bakersfield interim service line with the stops in Kings and Tulare and Madera. Merced, Fresno, Bakersfield, that whole area, in excess of 2 million people throughout the area, so fast growing. In addition to that, we've been very encouraged too by some of the support from the federal government, or some of the statements coming out of the federal government right now too, for building and continuing the high-speed rail line, not just in California, but throughout the country. So thank you, everybody, for your work.
Thank you, Mayor Serrato, and thanks for joining us today.
Mr. Chairman, next we have up Dan Levitt.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Levitt.
Good morning, Chair Richards. Hope you're doing well. Good morning, members of the board. As stated, my name is Dan Levitt. I represent the Central Valley Rail Working Group, the San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission, and the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority. The Central Valley Rail Working Group includes all the regional transportation planning agencies, regional rail operators, counties, and major cities in the Sacramento to Merced corridor. The San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission is the owner-operator of the ACE commuter rail service, and the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority is the managing agency for the state-funded San Joaquin's intercity passenger rail service. The Central Valley Rail Working Group, the San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission, and the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority have submitted formal letters supporting your revised draft 2020 business plan and the implementation of high-speed rail, which will greatly benefit the future of California. We strongly support moving forward with the electrified Merced Bakersfield high-speed rail interim service with intermediate stations at Madera, Fresno, and Kings Tulare, and delivering true high-speed rail service to California as soon as possible. We greatly appreciate your efforts.
Thank you, Dan. Have a good day.
Mr. Chairman, we have next up Sharon Nicole.
Good morning, Ms. Nichols.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. We hear you loud and clear, Ms. Nichols. Can you hear us?
You can hear me. Thank you. My name is Sharon Nicole. I am a long-term Wasco resident and currently, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay,
Yes.
thank you. My name is Sharon Nicole. I'm a long-time Wasco resident and currently serve on the Board of Trustees for the Wasco Union High School District. I wanted to speak to you today regarding the high-speed rail project currently being built through our community. It truly saddens me that such a promising project has become such a tragedy for my community. While I would hope that we can tell our students of all the wonderful things the project will bring to Wasco, the reality is that it has been a catastrophe for the community. My family, neighbors, and colleagues on the high school board of trustees have been following the project's development, including the circumstances of the Wasco farm labor camp. I understand now that the High-Speed Rail Authority had an alternative option to bypass Wasco and construct the tracks east of town. However, the authority forced the project through Wasco, required the relocation of the residents of the labor camp so that the High-Speed Rail Authority can save money on the project. And now, not only will Wasco lose its Amtrak service once the High-Speed Rail project is completed, but the city is saddled with a $10 million expense to demolish the labor camp after it benefited the authority to be vacated. It is saddening to see that a community with such a significant minority and disadvantaged population be subjected to such racial inequality and discrimination. As a high school district, we are working hard to prepare our students for the future. We have to prepare them to be future caretakers of the community they grew up in. It is clear that the project is having such a negative impact on the community that the vitality of our community may never be restored. Our community has many needs, but the city cannot meet those needs because of the impact that the high-speed rail project is having on Wasco. Sadly, Wasco has experienced a significant increase in violent crime. Our law enforcement resources have spent countless hours every week at the farm labor camp, following up on reports of theft and criminal activity. Our local businesses along the high-speed rail project have been repeatedly broken into, items stolen, and vehicles and equipment vandalized. They have spent thousands of dollars to replace stolen items and repair damaged vehicles and equipment. Some
Over
items
the
are
2-minute
recovered by
time limit.
sheriff deputies at the labor camp, but the cost of mounting losses will have to be passed on to the customers at some point. Who do you think most of those customers are, or who the employees surrounding area?
Miss Nickel, can you try to?
Thank you. Thank you for your
try to finish
time.
up? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we have next up Ann Schneider.
Good morning, Ms. Schneider.
Thank you. My name is Ann Schneider. I'm mayor of the city of Millbrae, the only high-speed rail station proposed between San Francisco and San Jose. I don't know if the board has been brought aware of the problems high-speed rail has caused to Millbrae by coming to our council meeting in July of 2019 and saying, contrary to the plans you have already approved, housing and commercial benefit, commercial operations, we're going to turn a significant portion of your town into a surface parking lot so that we can have parking at our multimodal station, which is also a BART station, a Caltrain station, shuttle buses to most of the high-tech businesses and colleges. And we're only 3.2 square miles, so a significant portion of our city. In the business plan on page 13, on the second paragraph, it says that high-speed rail has been working with communities throughout the layout and that they have an MOU with the city of Millbrae. Absolutely not true. And the city has spent additional staff hours over the last 2 years, and we're a small city of 23,000 people, huge expense, trying to come up with alternative plans to make high-speed rail happy, and then they just turn and walk away. Our position is, as was promised to the voters in 2008, that you underground operations through the city of Millbrae, that you treat us with the same respect that you are giving to San Francisco and Fresno in terms of how you are budgeting projects. But right now, all you mention is that you have an MOU with Millbrae. You're going to approve or discuss approving the business plan today, and
15 seconds remaining.
that is actually not true. So I am asking you to not approve the business plan, at least that portion. I know you're concentrating on the Central Valley, but what you are doing to Millbrae is devastating. And in fact, you could save tens of billions of dollars by simply using the electrified Caltrain bullet train.
Over the 2-minute time limit.
And I am your future station. So this process in and of itself has been exhausting, and I would invite all of you, if you haven't, to come to the city of Millbrae and see what you are considering doing to us before you approve a business plan that has a misstatement or a lie in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm going to just ask Mr. Kelly if we'd make sure that we remove Millbrae from that portion of the report or of this business plan.
Can we have discussion on that, or Brian, are you okay with that?
Well, they are not. I mean, they've raised this before, and if there is not an MOU, an agreement working with Millbrae, we should take it out. If there is one,
Just want to be clear,
we'll deal with it.
Chairman, that the page does not say we have an MOU with Millbrae. It says that we have executed planning agreements with several cities, including Millbrae.
Yeah.
We have done that.
If we have a planning
The
agreement
issue with the Millbrae station is part of what we're doing during the environmental document.
Okay, all right.
And we are in a back and forth with the city of Millbrae and still
Okay.
working through the
All right,
issues.
all right. As long as you're satisfied that it's accurate with what we're saying, then we'll leave it.
Thank you.
All right. Go ahead, please, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, we have next up a Marcus Ballard.
Good morning, Mr. Ballard.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate your time. My name is Marcus Ballard. First name Marcus, M-A-R-C-U-S. Last name Ballard, B-A-L-L-A-R-D. And thank you again for your time. I am also a citizen of Wasco, and I am a husband, a father, teacher, minister, and citizen of Wasco. We are a small town. I am from there, was raised there, moved away, now I'm back. So I've been teaching here for the last 5 years. We have some good people, high poverty, but good people here. And due to the high-speed rail choosing to go through our city of Wasco, we've been left with a huge problem that is having and will continue to have a negative and harmful and dangerous impact on our community. And this problem, as mentioned before, is the abandoned labor camp. As you know, you've already been made aware of that due to the relocation of the labor camp in our town, the old labor camp was left and abandoned. This relocation was done because the high-speed rail chose to go through our town. Because of the abandoned labor camp, I have seen gang activity increase. I've seen violence in our town increase, and just the safety of our town diminish. And as mentioned before, I am a father and husband. And as you know, that's my first priority, is just safety for my family and for this community. The abandoned labor camp now serves as a safe haven for criminal activity. I've seen my students. I teach 6th grade in middle school, many of them impoverished. We call them high-risk kids. You know, we're just hoping and doing our best to make sure that when they grow up, that they become good citizens. And so these are their riskiest years. I've seen my students make their way over to the labor camp to engage in some of the criminal activity. The abandoned labor camp now is luring some of our most vulnerable children, just trying to lure them into criminal activity. I'm almost done. I just want to ask the board to just to consider funding the demolishment of the abandoned labor camp. I just feel like California's dream for high-speed rail cannot become a nightmare for the citizens, parents, and California residents of Wasco. I really appreciate your time. Thank you, board.
Thank you, Mr. Ballard.
Mr. Chairman, we have next up a attendee who will be providing comment via the phone. So I'm going to call on the last 4 digits of the phone number, which is 6262.
Good morning. If you can state.
Good morning.
If you
Good morning, Chair Richards, Roland LeBrun, San Jose. I'd like to follow up on the thing I brought to your attention last month. It's the disappearance of all the authorities' agendas and attachments prior to January 2018. In particular, I want to bring to your attention the January 2002 board meeting, agenda item number 7, which is the quantum, just like quantum minus the U, the quantum alignment optimization report, which reads as follows. Although this work was completed over a 3-week period, including 1 week for training, the results are quite remarkable. The results on the Northern California mountain pass are the most striking. In past studies, Pacheco Pass was estimated to have no less than 12 miles of tunnels. Using quantum, an alignment has been created that reduces the total amount of tunneling to just over 5 miles. Furthermore, they're now talking about Southern California. The 31-mile direct tunnel alternative can now be replaced by a new alignment that totals only 11 miles of tunneling, with no single tunnel exceeding 5 miles in length. And what they're talking about is a 5-mile tunnel connecting Burbank to the 138 intersection, which is your Palmdale connection, by the way, because Palmdale is on the Las Vegas line. And then another 5-mile tunnel that's going to connect the 138 to the Grapevine. So let me wrap up here. I'm going to give Mr. Kelly an ultimatum. Is that either he restores all the board meeting materials since the authority was formed to present in the next 3 months, or we will introduce legislation that's going to be taking care of this problem once and for all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we have next up for public comment, Alex Garcia.
Good morning, Mr. Garcia. Mr. Garcia, good morning.
Oh, thank you so much. I apologize. Can you hear me now?
Not at all. We hear you loud and clear.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman Richards and members of the High Speed Rail Board of Directors. I do want to thank you for having me, allowing me the opportunity to address the board again. I would like to begin by thanking your fellow board member, Mr. Williams, for coming to Wasco and spending time listening to seeing the impacts the project has had on our community firsthand. Governor Newsom said on March 18th that the High Speed Rail project is the future. The project is the future, but the future of my community hangs in the balance. The city of Wasco reaffirms its position that the HSRA needs to mitigate the adverse impact it has created on our community. I would encourage the board members to review the U.S. Department of Transportation Federal Railroad Administration Record of Decision for CP4, which was released in June of 2014. The environmental justice findings in the FRA's decision concluded that the high-speed rail project, and I quote, will result in disproportionately high and adverse effects on minority and low-income populations in Fresno, Wasco, Shafter, Bakersfield, and the rural areas of Newark Avenue, Fifth Avenue, Joaquina Avenue, and Corcoran, and the community of Chrome south of Shafter. These impacts would include an increase in both ambient noise levels and vibration impacts, disruption of existing communities, residential and business displacements, and the displacement of important community facilities, impacts to park resources, decreases in visual quality. Minority and low-income populations may also experience adverse cumulative noise and vibration, community cohesion and aesthetic visual impacts. It goes on to reference mitigation measures and state that these measures would not completely eliminate the adverse impacts, which would likely be more severe in urban areas. The entire city of Wasco is located in an SB 535 and AB 1550 disadvantaged low community area. It is within a half mile of these areas. The board of directors has reached a settlement agreement in the past, and the authority needs to reconsider the mitigation agreement that we have sent them this morning. In 2016, that mitigation agreement was approved for the relocation of the residents of the former labor camp housing complex. The authority needs to review that, and I do look forward to that discussion in the future board meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia.
The impact of the project has had on our
2 minutes.
Mr. Garcia, can you just try to wrap it up, please?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
The impacts of the rail doesn't just touch the edge of our community, it travels the entire north and south lengths of our city. Trucks pollute in our air, kicking up dust and debris, creating detour routes that impact public safety response times and impact transporting of patients to hospitals in our area. Our city roads are damaged and on and on. The city recently had to purchase specialized equipment for our deputies patrolling dark and dimly lit areas of the construction zone and the labor camp housing complex.
Mr. Garcia, if I could encourage you, you could do one other thing. If you, it sounds like you're reading something, if you could forward that to us.
Scope for a second mitigation agreement between the city of Wasco and the authority. I do hope that second draft mitigation agreement that was sent this morning is on a future agenda for consideration. Again, we appreciate your consideration and your time this morning. I look forward to speaking at your next meeting. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia.
Mr. Chairman, we have next up a Brian Yanity.
Mr. Yanity, I'm sorry, good morning.
Oh, good morning, Chair Richards and members of the board. Thank you for this opportunity to provide comments today. My name is Brian Yanity, spelled Y-A-N-I-T-Y, and I'm the Vice President South of the Rail Passengers Association, or RailPAC. At the two recent legislative hearings on high-speed rail, RailPAC has expressed our strong support for the draft 2020 business plan. We have urged legislators to appropriate the remaining $4 billion in Proposition 1A funds to complete construction and electrify the corridor in the Central Valley. And as a Southern Californian, I live within walking distance of a major Metrolink station, but I strongly support the authority's efforts in the Central Valley and have told my Southern California legislators to support the draft 2020 business plan and completion of the Merced Bakersfield segment under construction. RailPAC is an all-volunteer organization that was founded in 1978, and we've been supporting high-speed rail in California since 1978. We've been a consistent supporter of the high-speed rail project, even when it's not politically popular to do so. Many of our members have regularly contacted their elected representatives in support of it and will continue to, not because we're being paid to do so, but because we are volunteering our time to support something we feel is very beneficial to the Golden State. I assure you that the California High-Speed Rail Authority can have no better friend than RailPac. But as a friend, I would like to raise a concern I have about a political and stakeholder risk to the project here in Southern California, which isn't even mentioned in the business plan. And this is the High-Speed Rail Authority's LA to Anaheim segment EIR process, which includes the Colton Intermodal Yard proposed by BNSF, project partner. That is generating quite a bit of opposition in the Inland Empire, with political leaders, communities, environmental groups there already speaking out against it and saying the authority has not really consulted them. There's a perception building the Inland Empire that the High-Speed Rail Authority is conspiring with BNSF to dump a lot more diesel pollution and truck traffic by placing a new diesel intermodal yard in their community. That's a violation, it sounds like, of your own environmental justice policy, and what needs to be studied there is electrified freight rail to mitigate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yanity.
Mr. Chairman, we have next up, and I want to apologize for any mispronunciation I may do, Orcadia Ocampo.
Is it Mr. Ocampos or Arcadia, Ms. Ocampos?
Orquídea Ocampo.
Welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning. I am a mother and active parent in the Wasco High School Tiger Parent Club, a Wasco Scholarship Board member, and co-founder of the Orange Heart Foundation. I was born and raised in Wasco, and I am one of the proud few who was fortunate to live at the Wasco Farm Labor Camp as a child. Now, I recall community meetings in which representatives from the high-speed rail authorities talked about the positive the high-speed rail project was going to bring to our community. I am sickened by the images that the authority constantly puts out about the Wasco Viaduct. Your business plan that you will discuss later even shows on page 33 a picture of the Wasco Viaduct, then and now. What the authority intentionally decides not to show is the Wasco labor camp in the background. The picture always cuts out the bad part of the project that you don't want anyone to know. Well, let me paint a picture to you. Picture the residential community of over 225 homes. Picture hardworking families coming home after working in agriculture industry, the engine and lifeblood of the Central Valley. Picture children coming home from school and feeling safe and playing outside the neighborhoods with relatives and friends. Now picture this. Picture those homes with broken windows, drug paraphernalia left out, walls of homes graffitied by rival gangs. Imagine thieves and drug users hiding out in those homes that once were occupied by family and children. Imagine the sheriff deputy getting into a foot chase in the darkened night with a suspect, a wanted felon, and that deputy injuring himself after being struck by an object he didn't see.
Remaining.
This is a nightmare to my family, my neighbors, my coworkers that live here, thanks to the high-speed rail authority's failure. Do you know how many times the term social equity and justice are used in your draft plan? Social equity once on page 10, justice twice on page 8.
Over 2 minutes.
Let's not kid ourselves. You use those words such as environmental justice and social equity when it suited you to save you millions to relocate the residents of Wasco Farm Labor Camp. But now that your decision and your actions have unforeseen consequence, you failed and say it is not your fault or responsibility. Where is your humanity? Where is your morals? An ethical responsibility to say you made a mistake and you're going to fix it. It is your staff that said they would. Instead, this project limits the city's ability to address other community needs because $10 million problem the high-speed rail authority left our community. How is the authority any different from criminals and thieves that terrorize our community and hide out at the labor camp? I serve on the city sales tax committee. I understand that the city doesn't have any resources. The authority decided to come through Wasco, and in doing so, the Wasco labor camp was a problem that you needed to solve. And in doing so, you created a new one and you're choosing not to solve it. All I'm asking you guys is to make this right. Make it right for our community.
Thank you, Ms. Ocampo.
Mr. Chairman, we have next up Troy Hightower.
Good morning, Mr. Hightower.
Good morning, Chairman Richard and the rest of the board. My name is Troy Hightower. I represent Californians for High-Speed Rail. I've been closely following this project for, I don't know, a dozen years. And Mr. Chair, I've known you since you became, well, not just a board member before you became chair. But I'll be brief, unlike others. We are very understanding of many challenges that high-speed rail project and authority has had over the years. But we do believe that this is vital and it's necessary to the economic growth of the city. So we do support high-speed rail project and we urge the board to adopt the business plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hightower.
Mr. Chairman, we don't have any attendees with their hands raised currently at the moment.
Okay.
Oh,
Thank you.
apologies, Mr. Chairman. We
Right.
have a Rick Harnish.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Harden.
Well, my name is Rick Harnish. I'm the Executive Director of the High Speed Rail Alliance. We are a national organization with roughly 100 members in California. We recently have been gathering petition signatures and have, as of today, 1,252 signatures, with the vast majority of them being California residents, supporting the plan as you have outlined. We urge you to adopt that plan, and we offer our support in seeking federal funding in order to expedite the work that is outlined in that plan. Thank you very much for being such a leader in passenger rail across the country.
Thank you, Mr. Harnish.
Mr. Chairman, we had an attendee who raised their hand and put it down. I'm not sure if it's due to any technical difficulties, but I'll call on them. Mike Behan.
Mr. Behan?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you well. Thank you. Good morning.
Apologies, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Mike Behan, Deputy City Manager from the City of Palmdale. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. We have submitted a formal letter for today's board meeting in support of the revised draft 2020 business plan. Prior to today's meeting, we provided written and verbal testimony on 3 different occasions. First was at the March 2nd high-speed rail public comment meeting. The second was at the March 10th Assembly Transportation and Budget Subcommittee meeting. And then the third was March 16th at the Senate Transportation Committee and Senate Budget Subcommittee meeting, all emphasizing our support for the California high-speed rail and the revised draft 2020 business plan. We support an electrified system. We encourage the completion of the 119 miles that's been started. And we also encourage that we finish the environmental impact reports and the related record of decisions so that we can move the project forward. We'd also like to say that we truly appreciate the partnership with the authority, and we look forward to the system arriving in Palmdale. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Behan.
Mr. Chairman, for monitoring the list, we don't have any attendees who raised their hands currently at this moment.
Okay. Thank you, Mo. Then, ladies and gentlemen, we will now move on to the agenda items for today's meeting. The first item is the approval of the February 9th board minutes. Do we have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Directors Scusia and seconded by Vice Chair Miller. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any objections? Thank you. Passed unanimously. Item number 2 is an action item. It is the presentation for the adopting of the revised 2020 business plan. Mr. Kelly.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and board members. I do have a brief PowerPoint to go through to describe what's before you in the draft business plan. Before I do, I just wanted to say a couple of things. You know, today is March 25th, 2021, and you have before you consideration of the adoption of the 2020 business plan. Execution of this act is typically done in May of even-numbered years. But as we all know, 2020 was a very different kind of year, mostly related to the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. The adoption of the 2020 business plan has been delayed 3 times, from May to June, June to December, and from December to now. We have used those delays to further our assessment of where the program stands, to adjust our estimates for costs and schedules accordingly, and to advance the work we have underway, and also to engage outside review, as requested by the legislature, of our prior analysis for recommended project advancement. After completing these tasks, the proposed 2020 business plan before you today calls for utilizing the funding currently available to this program to achieve the following objectives. Complete the civil works and lay track for the 119 miles of work currently under construction. Complete the environmental work for all phase 1 segments between San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Anaheim. Complete our commitments to the bookend projects in Los Angeles and the Bay Area, projects that are currently valued at some $3 billion. And expand the 119-mile segment to 171 miles, connecting the cities of Merced, Fresno, and Bakersfield, and to commence the nation's first electrified high-speed rail service by the end of this decade. This forms the first building block of the electrified high-speed rail service called for in Proposition 1A, and it enables the authority to test and certify our tracks, our train sets, and systems, and enables operations to begin on assets we will have constructed and own. This concept represents only the first step on the journey to develop full statewide high-speed rail service connecting San Francisco to Los Angeles and Anaheim. Both the authority and the legislative peer review group have been clear in this plan and prior plans that to achieve the full objective statewide, and present high-speed rail service from LA and Anaheim all the way to San Francisco, we will need more stable funding, and particularly a deeper and longer-term commitment from our federal partner. Recently, both Governor Newsom and United States Senator Alex Padilla have asked the Biden administration to include in its upcoming Build Back Better infrastructure proposal a long-term commitment, just as the federal government did to build the interstate highway system, to developing high-speed passenger rail in America. As the governor and Senator Padilla noted, such a commitment will enable us to expand this program from the Central Valley to the Bay Area and to Southern California. We're encouraged by the public statements from the Biden administration about the future of passenger rail and high-speed rail, and we look forward to working closely with them to expand our work. This business plan reflects the vision to get electrified high-speed rail started in California, and it is also a measured approach to advancing toward that goal, reflecting important lessons learned that we've learned from this project. Today's action by the board is a necessary step to fulfilling its duties as outlined in agreements between the legislature and the Newsom administration. Today is the day to act in order for the authority to meet the timeline for submittal of the business plan to the legislature. There is much more work ahead with the legislature to secure the bond appropriation the Newsom administration will submit in the May revise. That work and those conversations will be informed by a clearer understanding of broader state and federal revenues available for infrastructure investment. We look forward to participating in those conversations. And with that, members, I'm happy to present a brief PowerPoint. I'll be joined by Frank Vaca, the director of our rail operations, to discuss and describe a little bit the trade-offs with the one-track versus two-track option. And other than that, we'll walk through the basic summary of the plan. First, as this slide depicts, we released the draft plan on the 9th. We executed a 30-day public comment period where we received some 257 comments on the plan. Today is March 25th for board action on the plan. And then, of course, we submit this draft plan to the legislature by April 15th. That's the current schedule we are under. Next slide. The materials that have been provided to the board to support a decision today is, of course, the draft business plan itself, which was released and shared on February 9th. The public comments that we've received on this, the staff recommended edits table, an errata and updates table, and of course the board memorandum of understanding and resolution, sorry, that is in your packet. Next slide. There's been a lot of public comment opportunities, letters, email, voicemails, websites, and hearings. March 2nd, we had a special board hearing where we took public comment. About 73% of those comments were in support of the business plan. On March 10th, I testified before the State Assembly Joint Legislative Hearing, and on March 16th, I testified before the State Senate Joint Legislative Hearing. A lot of public comment in support of the business plan during those hearings, and as I said earlier, more than 250 total comments received on this draft business plan. Next slide. The first thing that's important to note about this, and particularly in light of the delays that allowed us to assess further how we are being impacted by COVID and other issues relative to the project, is that clearly the experience has elevated our appreciation for risk. And one of the themes in this business plan, articulated mostly in Chapter 6, are steps and actions we're taking to deal with risk and manage risk much better and in a much more comprehensive way than we have in the past. That includes increasing our contingency for risk going forward, developing our enterprise risk management program, which we've presented to the board in the past, involves a new risk committee, supporting a new enterprise risk manager who we're bringing on, and bringing additional risk expertise into the authority. Also, and importantly, to ensure that we don't repeat some mistakes of the past, we've looking to implement a stage gate project development and delivery process going forward. We will act in a methodical and incremental way going forward toward future procurements for construction. That involves the sequencing of stages and gates, which serve as a formal decision milestones before we take the next step, integrate into the authority governance policies and procedures, how we will move going forward. And again, each gate serves as a control feature to ensure that decisions are made within a informed risk framework. And again, the idea is the stage gate process for procurement is a step-by-step path on project delivery that first involves advancing design, recognizing the third-party agreements and the things like utilities relocations and right-of-way procurements that you need to map and identify. And then we take the next step to do that work before we get to full procurement. So clearly a better understanding of risk and the implementation of risk management measures. Next slide. The commitment in this business plan does remain to completing the Merced to Bakersfield line as the initial electrified high-speed rail step in California. This is consistent with what we can do within the constraints of our current budget as we see it between now and 2030. Important steps for us to advance this is, of course, completing some value engineering on both the Merced and Bakersfield side. That we'll have a conversation about phasing track implementation. Shortly, Frank Vaca will do a presentation on the trade-offs on that, and that is ultimately a decision the board will make later, not today, but later as we are informed by the bids that will come in on the track and systems project. And of course, we're in consultation with Counsel on the appropriate train procurement strategy that, again, is a decision down the road. Total elements to complete this line, obviously, there's the extensions to Merced and Bakersfield, high-speed rail trains for interim operations, the development of the 4 stations on that stretch, and our cost estimate ranges from $3.1 to $4.5 billion for these items. Next slide. The business plan does update our current schedule for the completion of our work. You see during 2020 in that second column, we did release and completed the draft environmental documents for several of the segments in Northern and Southern California. I'm pleased that later this summer, we'll be bringing to the board the Bakersfield to Palmdale extension for ROD certification, as well as we hope the Burbank to LA segment later in this year. Early next year, we'll have the Bay Area elements of San Jose to Merced and San Francisco to San Jose. And then lastly, we'll return to the Southern California elements that are Palmdale to Burbank and LA to Anaheim. But that's the updated schedule, which is in the business plan on our environmental work. Next slide. You've seen this slide before, but this is just, again, reminding folks of where we are in the construction packages. We estimate construction package 1 will complete its work at December of 2023. These are updated, more informed risk assessed schedules. Construction package 2, 3, also at the end of 23. Construction package 4 is heading towards substantial completion by the second quarter of 22. And of course, we're still working and we'll return to the board for options on the track and systems contract later this year for that work to commence in 2022. Lastly, on the left there, consistent with the environmental documents, the green is what we've already cleared, about 200 miles of the phase 1 system. As we get through 2021, we'll add 91 more miles, Bakersfield to Palmdale, and the first link between Burbank and LA will be before the board later in 2021. Lastly, we'll do the final elements in 2022 to reach full environmental clearance of the phase 1 system. Next slide. We did indicate in the business plan where we see the project right now. We identified what we called known costs from our assessments done in late fall and early winter of 2020 of increased cost of $330 million, recognizing that we have settlements to finish going forward, as well as just preparing for risk generally. We're looking at adding $1 billion in risk contingency to that budget. So again, not before the board today, but we will be coming back for a budget estimate of that increases both for cost and risk contingency of about $1.3 billion for the work in the Central Valley. We indicated that in the presentation in February, but again, reminding folks this is what's in the current business plan. Next slide. Funding, as we indicated, there is some slight change here. Business plan updates the funding forecast through 2030 as a range based on our cap and trade projections. As you know, we estimate cap and trade between $500 and $750 million a year. The total funding range is that 20.6 to 23.1. We have a mid-range of about 21.8, which is being updated in the current business plan. And our cost estimate to complete the work between Merced and Bakersfield falls roughly in that range, 21.3 to 22.8 under our current cost estimates. As you know, we've also are pursuing a funding plan, which the board approved for submittal to the legislature in February, that will take the form in the legislative discussions of a formal ask by the Newsom administration in the budget context in May revise for that funding. That'll be done in May, and then we will work with the legislature on how we'll move forward on that issue. Next slide. I did mention that we identified the cost of $330 million of what we called known costs relative to the construction in the valley, and a budget augmentation of $1 billion for additional contingency. To clarify some things that came up in some of the legislative hearings, we did clarify the language in the recommended staff changes that the $330 million is part of the estimate that we made for the costs that we know are relative to the construction work. We highlight that there are some risks remaining in settlements that still have to be negotiated. We think the adjusted budget, including the known costs and the risk contingency, is sufficient to cover those things. And we note that the $1 billion risk contingency also augments an existing program contingency of $420 million in the current program. Again, we will report these risks as they materialize and how much contingency is required as we go forward, and we clarified that in this business plan. Next slide. The staff recommended edits generally focus on a couple of key areas, clearly the risk issues that I just mentioned. Also, we bring back some language that we wanted to clarify, and you've heard in prior conversations as we identify the right-of-way and the other things we may need to extend beyond the 119 miles to get into Bakersfield or Merced. In the north, there are, we know there will be some long lead right-of-way parcels that we will have to deal with. One of them relates to the Golden Empire Transit Facility on the way to Bakersfield. So we do bring back language in this business plan that recognizes that's something we'd have to work on as we go forward. We did respond to legislative questions regarding the costs, as I mentioned, and the remaining risk and role of the contingency. We also update in this, in the revisions from the staff language, the updates on the ARA match requirement. We've now in February, since the plan came out, we've reached 100% of state submittal of the ARA match from state funds, and under the Biden administration, they've now approved 64% of those funds, with about 36% remaining to be reviewed. So we update that as well. We do talk a little bit about future federal partnership opportunities. Obviously, there's a new federal administration in place. There's talk of infrastructure investment being next on the agenda for the president and Congress. And so we do talk about some of the bills that have been introduced in the last 3 or 4 weeks that are described in the updated business plan, as well as some communications we've had with the Biden administration broadly on transportation funding. And finally, we clarify the timing of the phased track option. And I want to just spend 1 minute on this before I hand it over to Frank Vaca, our Director of Rail Operations. We did say in the draft business plan that our intention was to move to the one-track option. One of the language changes that we're making here and conceptual changes we're making here is that we want to be very clear on what the one-track option both provides as a benefit and what the trade-offs are of doing it in a phased way. The singular benefit is essentially that you can defer cost to a later time when demand may call more for that second track. And that's a key benefit. There are some, what I would call marginal operational issues with the single track that double track doesn't have to contend with. And so our approach now in this plan is to, again, in a moment, Frank will go through some of those trade-offs, but in the business plan, what we describe is our want for the bidders on the track and systems program to bid it 2 ways, or actually 3 ways. One is a single track, one is the double track, and the one is sort of a phased single track first, double track later series of bids that will come in that the authority will receive in July and have time to evaluate before we make any decision on how best to proceed with the track and systems option. And so I think we have some time, and we'll certainly be informed between July and September on what those issues look like, what those differences are. And there'll also be plenty of time to consult with the legislature on what those options are. So those are things that are coming forward. And we do take a little bit of a step back in the staff recommendation here that we want to look at this phase. We want to understand what the bid options look like. And we want to be able to present that to all of you for a decision later in the year. So with that, let me move to the next slide. This is where I'll introduce to you Frank Vaca, Chief of Rail Operations. Again, the one track versus 2 track option. We think this is something that we should consider to ensure that we move forward in the most efficient way possible. Frank's presentation here will go through those options and provide, again, both the trade-offs and the benefits of either option. And again, we expect to see bids back from bidders in July of this year on what these options will look like, and provide the board and the legislature and others with time for us to evaluate those before we make a decision in September. Okay, so Frank, with that, why don't you take it from here?
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Kelly.
Tom, before Brian leaves, real quick question. So we're not making a decision, we're not being asked to make a decision that we're going to move forward with a single track system today?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. As Mr. Kelly articulated, my presentation today is actually informational only, and it's presented today because of questions we received, and to clarify and provide some background on why staff has added this phased track option, construction option, to the 2020 business plan. It is a recommendation that it should be looked at for both the 119-mile segment as well as the full interim service line between Merced and Bakersfield. Again, reiterating what Mr. Kelly indicated is that we'd be waiting for the tracking systems bid and proposal to further inform this evaluation and to determine whether it's an option we would want to bring forth to the board for consideration, probably in the August timeframe. Next slide, please. So overall benefits and why we started looking at this alternative is that the single track option allows the authority to defer the significant capital costs associated with the second track. It also reduces the cost for the single track during the initial operation, allowing the ramp up period to be a little bit shorter and help meet that no subsidy requirement. The alignment would have passing tracks located along the alignment, which I'll describe later as we go through the presentation of where they're located. It does not diminish or change any of the operational requirements for the interim service that we've evaluated in the side-by-side study. That includes the 18 trains per day per direction for the service, as well as the 90 to 100-minute travel time savings that we've relied on for the outcome of that study. The second track would be installed as travel demands require in the interim service territory, or as we expand beyond that to the San Francisco and Valley to Valley outcome. And once again, we will ask the tracking systems bidders to provide estimates for each of the alternatives so that we can evaluate them and bring the appropriate decision or consideration to the board. Next slide. There are examples of this approach around the world, Spain, Germany, France, but in particular, you would recognize the Bright Line Express West between Las Vegas and Victorville. They are beginning their construction with this single track passing sighting approach. So it's not new to the industry. Next slide, please. So how would the alignment or the configuration take place? Well, first, let me first say that all of the designs for the entire alignment would be done as part of the single track option. So all the designs both for the single and double track would be completed. All of the signals and communication designs and construction for the entire system would be completed. All the high voltage supply stations design and construction would be completed as part of the single track. The only infrastructure that would be left out would be the second track and the associated catenary for that second track. As you can see here, we talked about the fact that trains would have to pass each other along the alignment. There are 6 locations that we would propose that this could take place. The 4 stations, Merced, Madera, Kings Tulare, and Bakersfield are the 4 stations. If you look to the pictorial on the right side, we would propose a full build out, which includes two platform tracks, 1 for each direction, and 2 mainline tracks. 2 additional maintenance of way sites south in the Fresno, also known as Fresno Works, and the Corcoran location would have their double track full build out also completed. This would allow 6 locations where trains could meet and pass. If you look at the pictorial at the bottom of the slide, you'll see the station configuration with the associated switches and tracks so that you can move between tracks on the left and on the right with a single track portion between those station locations. The dotted line being the future track and the solid line, the single track portion. And that would be the configuration between Merced and Bakersfield.
Frank,
Yes.
this is Lynn.
Sure.
So I just want to make the dotted line. So were to come to pass, a single track, which, is a big if.
Right.
The plan is to, in the future, have it double tracked in between these particular stations or not?
Yes, absolutely. Our plan is to full build out at all times. This is just a phased approach, and we'll provide some reason why the phased approach can be beneficial to the program. Yes,
Okay.
the plan will always be to complete the full double track alignment.
I just wanted to make sure that was on the record.
Sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Frank, one question with regard to your previous slide on the operational performance. I know that you have analyzed it and that you're saying that there will not be any changes. Does the analysis also include any impact on revenue expected at the fare box?
Yes, and we'll cover that in this slide. Absolutely.
All right.
Good question. Next slide, please. Now, from an operational perspective, the single track supports the service plan that we talked about. This is the same service plan that we presented in the 2018 and the 2020 business plans. It's 1 train per hour per direction for 18 hours. Maintenance, as before, would take place in non-service hours between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. Trains will pass each other at station locations or one of the 6 locations we identified in the previous slide. And the trains will operate at speeds up to 220 miles an hour. Again, showing the alignment down. So this meets all the service and O&M foundational elements of that interim service plan. Next slide, please. So safety, that question has come up. Is it safe? Is it as safe? Well, the double track and the single track configurations are equally safe. We will be using state-of-the-art fail-safe signal communication system, which will be installed. The system continually monitors the alignment, both infrastructure-wise and the train performance. Trains are automatically stopped in case of a system abnormality or a problem. Both the single track and the double track alignment has bi-directional operations on all track. That's the way it's signaled. The signal system will be tested and certified as safe for operation by not only the designers and builders, but an independent safety assessor will then be an independent review and certification. And then ultimately, the Federal Railroad Administration must review and agree with our assessor and certify, in fact, that it's a safer operation, because they'll need to provide that ability to operate. This type of signal system and certification approach is and has been used on high-speed rail systems around the world in Europe and Asia. And keep in mind, when we talk about single track, even if I have a double track operation, at times I may have one of those 2 tracks out of service for either some type of failure, for maintenance or whatever. And you'll be running essentially a single track operation, even if you have a double track. The signal system's designed to accommodate those kinds of situations.
Frank,
slide.
if I could ask you
Yes.
a quick question just on that point.
Sure.
If you have a double track and you do have that issue, you still have another one that can run. What if the 1 track scenario, if the line goes down, then what happens?
That's correct. That's one of the downsides of a single track, and we'll discuss the ramifications. We've actually penalized our train modeling because of that, and it does have some minimal, slight impact on revenue and ridership, and we'll show you that in the next few slides. Another good
Okay, thank
question.
you.
Yeah. Next slide, please. So, and in fact, here we are. This is the ridership matrix that was in the ETO side-by-side analysis for the Central Valley studies. And if you look at the shaded column in the middle, that's 2029 high-speed rail. That is the Merced to Bakersfield ridership numbers from that, the upside numbers from that study. The 2029 downside column adjacent to it on the right was the downside of that analysis. So the shaded is the upside of the ridership for Merced to Bakersfield, and the right column was the downside. So 8.8 million riders to a low of 8.3 million riders. The final column on the right is one that we've just added to this matrix, and it is the estimated impacts from the single tracking. And you will see that it is down about 2.5% in ridership. from an 8.8 high, it's down to about 8.6 million for the single track. And we'll talk about why that has that negative impact. But it's still well within the ranges. In fact, it's very close to the high range of the original study. And in fact, this slight impact and being within these ranges has no impact on the outcomes of that study and the recommendation from that study. If we go to the next slide, it'll talk about the revenue side of this. Again, the matrix provided is exactly the matrix other than the column on to the right in the ETO side-by-side study. The center is the high estimate of revenue from the Merced to Bakersfield at about $179 million. The downside or the range went from 179 to 163.4. The single track approach is slightly reduced by about 2.2% for the system by about 4 million at 175 million, and but still well within the expected range and not having any impact on the final outcome of that study, which was independently reviewed and peer reviewed. And we'll get into why in the next slide, I believe it is. Go to the next slide. So let's talk about the benefits and then the risks and trade-offs, directly answering some of the questions that have just come up. The deferral of the initial capital construction is about $1 billion from our estimate. Now, obviously, we're going to see what it really is when the bids come in for our track and systems contract. But by saving that $1 billion, that'll allow us the opportunity to utilize those funds on a cash flow basis for other elements, if in fact it comes to fruition. The single track approach provides a lower initial maintenance cost because you're maintaining 150 miles of less track to maintain. So it gives you a little bit of less maintenance cost, which helps that ramp up period. One of the issues with the no subsidy requirement is that you do have a transition from initial startup to full revenue service of a ramp up period. So this lower maintenance costs for the first few years would help that ramp up shorten a bit.
Frank, I have a quick question.
Sure.
Excuse me, Frank, I'm sorry. I have a quick question. The other side of that coin of saving the $1 billion, will the analysis or the estimates come back saying what the increased cost will be for us if we delay the second track and what that cost will be, additional cost will be?
Yep, that's one of the risks and trade-offs on the next slide. Right on.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
absolutely. We'll talk about that. Absolutely.
Okay.
Now, the single track approach will construct all the facilities that's needed for the second track. So all of the switches and interlockings, all the final station configurations will be constructed, as well as I indicated, the entire signal and communication system and the entire high voltage system. In addition, we're adding what we call tail tracks or spaces, about 1,000 feet added track to the switches at the interlocking, so that when you do build the second track, it will not go up against the service of the first track. So it'll be less disruptive to add that second track. So we've considered all of the options to make it as efficient as possible when adding that second track. And all those elements will be constructed with the first track. Next slide, please. So one of the major risks with the single track option is the fact that because you have to meet your opposing train at a specific location, at one of the 6 locations, the on-time transfer of passengers becomes very critical in terms of reliability. So we have to meet our connections at Merced between the San Joaquins, ACE, and the high-speed rail train has to be timed and optimized. Our model and our service plan allows for a 10-minute time to transfer those passengers at Merced. That 10 minutes, we have some pad and may be able to go 11 or 12, but it's critical that transfer be made as economically and as efficiently as possible. Because if you don't, that cascades into delays for your opposing train, and that's a risk. And we'll talk about how that. And that is one of the reasons we penalized our model for that risk, is one of the reasons why the revenue and the ridership was discounted at 2 to 3%, because it accounts for that risk and that probability that there might be some of those connections missed during the operation. And the second point in terms of trade-offs, as Director Perea mentioned, is the fact that as a single track, if you have a failure on the single track portion, again, it cascades to reliability issues in terms of response. However, we're talking about a brand new infrastructure, state-of-the-art system with electric MUs, electrified multiple unit trains, which means that unlike the freight train you see, or even the Amtrak train that's pulled by one locomotive or two locomotives, and if you have a locomotive failure, the train stops. Our high-speed trains have distributed power. We have motors throughout the train on different cars. So the reliability of that, of a high-speed rail train coming to a full stop and unable to move, is highly, highly unlikely. And so looking at these factors, we believe the risk on the single track is at acceptable levels because of the infrastructure and because of the type of train that we're operating.
Frank, I have one question.
Sure.
I apologize. Again, I have one more question. On that point, it sounds like that 10-minute window that you need in Merced is critical to keep our trains on time. So, and I know there are varying factors that exist within that window, but when you have, for example, the A system and the San Joaquins, and just remembering some of their issues with respect to on-time performance, they're, I believe, in the high 70s to mid 80%, which is not the best. So they're trying to improve that. But the biggest factor that affects that is the fact that they're on the BNSF lines and they can't control what the BNSF line is doing or what they're doing with their lines. So how do you mitigate that from our perspective? I mean, we may have new track, we may have the fastest trains, but how do we control that factor for them, since it's a BNSF line?
That is the single largest and significant area of concern for single tracking, is that meet. So right now, the San Joaquin business plan and their futures they're making modifications, additions, and to their alignment to help improve their on-time performance, as you've indicated. In fact, their business plan notes a number of locations between Merced and points north, both for ACE and San Joaquins, where they are working with the freights and working with CalSTA to fund on-time performance or reliability segments to improve that. We will have to work with them to ensure that we optimize that connection point. But that will remain the largest single risk for this reliability issue here. And we will have to do the best we can to ensure that those improvements are made in time for the initial service. And right now, their plan is to have them done prior to our 2028 timeframe. So they are ahead of us in terms of getting those improvements made.
But a dual track would mitigate that issue for us.
Yes, because you would still lose, you would still delay and have a reliability problem with the train that's meeting that delayed train. However, it would not cascade to the opposing train or opposing trains. The other issue is that we'd have to, we could probably wait a few minutes, whether it's 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 minutes in terms of a late train, make it 12 to 15 based on how much pad we add. Those are kind of the details we would have to optimize when we have their construction completed and have their new schedules and ours, and then we could optimize that meet and probably give a little bit more time there.
Okay, thank you.
In order to minimize that reliability.
Frank, I'm sorry.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Is a 10-minute transfer an industry standard? I mean, is that something that?
Well, actually, no. That's very generous. Okay. Very generous. This is a cross platform. You just walk from one train to the other train, so it's very generous, actually.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Generous for the U.S., but not internationally.
Frank, the The cost versus this trade-off on a single track to do dual track. Do you have an idea what that might be between the difference? What it'll cost us to add
Well,
a second?
Right, so the cost factor, there's three major cost factors here at the bottom of the slide. Basically, escalation, inflation, and the inefficiency of having to construct that second track adjacent to a live railroad. So the escalation and inflation obviously is how long are we waiting? Are we waiting 2 years, 5 years, 10 years to build the second track? That will determine the escalation and inflation portion. Working to the plan would be to add the second track at night. So you're adding an inefficiency of working at night, a 10-hour window. We would estimate, we would provide a 10-hour window for working at night. So you have some less efficiencies for the night work and the fact that you have an adjacent track with you. We will see what that is when we get the bids from the track and systems contractor, because we will ask them those specific elements. They'll price a track to be constructed during operational service times at night. And that'll be a specific number versus doing it in a greenfield construction concurrent with the first track.
Well,
So
the
we'll have
whole
those
idea
specific
behind
numbers.
a single track has been driven perhaps by the lack of funding. Am I correct in assuming that?
That is the primary advantage here.
Okay. So in the past discussions that we had earlier during the board meeting, we had parts of the community coming from Wasco that complained about some of the problems that high-speed rail has caused in their community. So if we were to construct a single track through a community, that's going to cause a fair amount of disruption. So coming back again to do it a second time is going to cause them even more disruption. And one of the things that we need is public support as well as legislative support to continue to get funding and support for this project. Have we measured the kind of disruption it causes in those communities?
No, we have not evaluated to that detail as of yet.
Well, I would suggest that we do that so that we start to look at, a dollar displacement versus the community that's being impacted. What is it really costing us, and what is it costing them? So I think that's part of the evaluation that we should consider.
Absolutely.
One of the other issues we talked about, I think Henry then asked this question about if a system goes down or a train breaks down in the single track segment, what happens then? I mean, you say it's a remote possibility, but what would happen if it stopped?
Yes.
How do we approach that?
We have two operational responses to something like that. One, we have standby trains at locations. We'll have 2 extra trains, one, and we'll decide where to place them, whether one's at Merced or one's at Fresno or one's at Bakersfield. And you would dispatch that train to pull the other train out of that section or to transfer passengers, pull it to the nearest station. So that would be the first alternative. The second, more draconian alternative would have to be to offload the passengers to buses, but highly unlikely you get to that point. But you do have emergency trains standing by to respond to that kind of situation.
How will the operations be maintained when there's a need for maintenance and inspection in the single track segment?
All whether it's single or double track, the maintenance is scheduled from 11 p.m. to 5 a.m.
Everything's off hours.
Off service hours. That's correct.
All right, thank you.
That's correct.
Frank, I'm sorry, Ernie, were you done?
Yes, thank you.
Just on this double track, single track, when we get to that point, will they have the option to do kind of a hybrid, like maybe double track to here, single track, you know what I mean? Or is it all just one or the other?
No. I mean, if our evaluation shows that we need more miles of double track, or we have enough dollars to do more, but not total, we can vary the amount of double track, absolutely. And that would also reduce the risks and increase the flexibility. So there is a sweet spot there.
Thank you.
back on the presentation. Okay, double track. Obviously, the benefits and the trade-offs with double track are, directly related to what we just said about the single track. The double track increases the flexibility for operational flexibility, so it decreases your service delays and increases your reliability. And of course, the second track is lower cost when constructed in that greenfield environment. And the negatives are the higher capital costs up front and the small amount of additional maintenance in the short term. So obviously they're complementary to what we talked about the single track. I think that's the end of this presentation. If you have any additional questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Just to validate something, this is not an action item we're being asked to make any decision on. This is just information, correct?
This is just information. We're going to do more evaluations. We're going to have our tracking systems bidders give us some hard numbers on these, and then we'll be back to the board to give you our recommendation, which could be either the double or the single, and we'll let the board decide what's best.
Okay, thank you.
Frank, I may have missed this, but why is the revenue down single track versus double track?
It's down because we've put a penalty in the modeling for the higher risk for the meet at Merced. We've acknowledged the fact that there's a on-time performance risk for the ACE and SJJPA to make Merced on time on a 95% on time or whatever. They're lower, so the model recognizes that risk and has penalized the revenue and ridership as a result of it. But
if the trains are passing each other at a double track intersection, I don't understand why we would have more of a risk.
The risk is the fact that when we're waiting for the high-speed rail train, can't leave Merced until ACE and SJJPA arrive at Merced. And if they arrive more than 10 to 12 minutes late, then the train leaving Merced will impact the northbound train because the meet no longer works. The northbound train will have to wait at a station until the southbound train gets there. And so that delay, if it happens too often, if it happens once a week, or if it happens twice a day, or the frequency of that delay would impact the reliability or on-time performance, which then, when you have a poor on-time performance, cascades to people looking for alternatives to use rather than the train. And that's the penalty you accept.
Okay, it's kind of a stretch. Thank you.
Yeah, Frank, so as I said during the pre-meeting briefing, this single track really gives me heartburn. But I just want to compliment you on the way you have laid this out, the options, or the way you've explained it. My heartburn is no less, but but I have a better understanding thanks to the way you made your presentation today and during our briefing. So thank you.
It's always a team approach. So thanks to the team.
Thank you, Frank.
Okay. Thank you.
Go back to
questions. I apologize. Go ahead, Brian.
No, Henry, if you had something else for Frank, go ahead. I was just going to finish the presentation.
Yeah, I have a few things for Frank. Frank, first, thank you for the presentation. I think you gave us, a good overview of the options. And the question I'll have for Brian at the end is just to triple confirm that the single track approval is not in this plan we're submitting today. But Frank, I hadn't thought about that 10-minute window in Merced. And I mean, as I think you're aware, I'm not a fan of the single track, and probably some of that comes from such a great job that you've done over the years in arguing the fact that we need a double track, and for all the reasons why the double track was needed or is needed to assure us of those on-time performance numbers that we have to achieve. And what I see in Merced is a total bottleneck. I think it's a fatal flaw in the single track argument, because only having had the experience on the San Joaquin, serving on that board and knowing what their on-time performance issues are, and a lot of it driven because they are on BNSF lines, and we have little to no control over what BNSF does with those lines. I mean, I can see our trains on a pretty regular basis late, just waiting for folks to come in. And I don't know how we control the funding from the state or federal level for the upgrades of the ACE line and the San Joaquins, you know, for them to improve their ability to move on that lines. But again, at the end of the day, it defaults to what BNSF does or doesn't do with their freight lines. Now, I know you gave a few examples in other countries where they do operate single lines, and I'm aware of that, but I've also been on their trains where they have the double lines. So not knowing how their freight lines work and how their passenger trains operate on those freight lines, if they do, how has that interaction, Frank, occurred or been dealt with where they have single tracks in other countries? Have you seen that?
I'm not sure I understand your question about the freight. Just as we will be having shared corridors between Gilroy and San Francisco, where we're sharing the alignment with the freight and other passenger trains, and southern areas similarly. Actually, some of the examples of the single track that I presented are segments of the high-speed line, both in France and Germany, where it is that situation where they're at one of their shared corridors, sharing with freight and other passenger trains, and the speeds are a little bit lower, just like ours is here, but the single track environment is a good comparison. So some of those single track lines that on the first page are examples of segments of high-speed rail segments, like ours between Gilroy and San Francisco and Southern California. I'm not sure if that answers your question or not.
No, it does. It does. I'll do some more background too. But my last question, Frank, is just this. I mean, obviously we're moving towards that Audit deadline to construct our track. So two questions attached to that. One is, do we have all of the right-of-way secured at this point, so that if construction begins, say in 3 months, they're ready to go, there's no delays? And number two, what is the actual timeline for preparing, releasing the RFP, and for returning with that data? What's your timeline?
Well, the timeline is that the bids are due at the end of June, and we'll be back to the board in August with a recommendation right now. And as Mr. Hedges has given presentations to the board and to the F&A committee, the turnover dates on the civil construction right now is a bit delayed in the 2022-23 timeframe, down to about 2023. So that's when the handover dates to the tracking systems will take place, back in the middle.
If I could weigh in here, Henry, one of the elements of the business plan is that we're pushed back the schedule dates for the completion of the civil works, and the track commencement won't begin until we hand over. So we're pretty clear on that in the schedules in the business plan. So the ARA date that you're most familiar with is not relevant to where we are now on the construction of this issue. The other thing I just think is worth noting on the connection points, as Frank mentioned, the biggest issue with the one track is the cascading effect if you only have the one track of any delay. But there are some mitigating things to that that include the idea of the SJJPA getting a single operator to operate all of the services, SJJPA, ACE, and the high-speed rail service over our assets. A single operator will probably improve the performance of all elements. They've also identified that they have $1.3 billion that they are now bringing to some of those infrastructure improvements that Frank was talking about for the north of Merced services to come in to the service in Merced. The biggest change in the service benefit and the ridership increases are not only the speed between Merced and Bakersfield, but it's the fact that with these assets and those improvements they're making, that you can increase the frequency of service from 7 a day to 18 a day. And that's one of the biggest benefits. So as Frank alluded to, we will get full information on costs and schedule and methods and means for the one track versus two track option to give you the triple confirmation you're looking for. We are not asking this business plan for a decision one way or the other on this issue. We recognize that we want to be informed by what the bidders say. We want to bring that back to the board when we know more. And so it's an option we wanted to put on the table for how we can move forward as efficiently as possible. But we also want to make sure that these kinds of trade-offs and risks are understood, and it will be more informed when the bids come in late June, early July.
All right. Thanks, Brian.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, I want to check with you on time. There is two small, quick slides that I would go back to my presentation unless you want me to move forward. Sorry, you're muted, Tom.
I'm sorry. All I'm asking is there any other questions for Frank before we go on? Frank, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, just one question then. The alignment that ACE brings into Merced, will that be as a result? Will that be dedicated alignment for ACE only?
No, there's a planned transportation center where the high-speed rail station will coexist with both SJJPA and ACE. So we'll be meeting at a R Street location with a joint transportation station. So we'll all be at the same place.
Okay, but I mean, I'm talking about north of Merced, where they come in as they're coming into Merced. Is the line north of Merced ACE uses? Is that going to be the same line that the San Joaquin uses, or it's not, isn't it?
Right now, the San Joaquin's comes in on the Burlington Northern Santa Fe going south,
right,
and ACE comes in on the UP. However, the plan is to connect.
Will ACE continue to be on a UP line?
ACE will continue on UP line. And SJJPA there'll be a connection made between the BN line and the UP line, right about where the station will be at R Street.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Brian, we'll move forward now. Thank you.
Sure. I'll go back to the presentation. I'll move as quickly as I can here. I just wanted to spend one moment to walk through. I think I certainly heard in the legislative hearings, and as we advance this business plan, I want to make sure that folks understand, today is a day about adopting a vision for how we can go forward. We understand there are additional conversations we must have with the legislature and the policymakers. We want to be informed by federal funding options that we expect to be coming forward this year. And so this is sort of a decision tree that I wanted to share with the board to get a sense of the timing of issues and about the consequences of how things may go one way or the other going forward. But again, none of this affects, in my view, the timing of our adoption of the plan. It is simply move forward on the plan and then understand we have to enter future discussions about where we're going on this. So the first thing here is that today you're approving the business plan, and this has us committing to finish our existing commitments. Those are the bookend projects in Los Angeles and the Bay Area, the completing of the environmental clearance for all of phase 1, San Francisco to LA and Anaheim, and the 119 miles of civil works, including track installation for the Central Valley segment. Next piece. So we're going to the legislature in the budget cycle asking for a funding plan, more Prop 1A dollars to be available so we could finish our work in the Central Valley and advance the program. There's two options for the legislature that, approve that funding or deny it. Next slide. If it's denied, we're going to have an issue because our current expectation for the availability of cap and trade dollars goes only into early 2022, which is the middle of the new budget year. And we would either have to stop down or slow construction if we don't have augmented funds to move forward on the construction in the Central Valley. This may impact our federal funding grant agreements, would reduce the likelihood for new federal funding. And we, again, as I said, our current estimate of available funding will be exhausted by early 2022 if we're just relying on cap and trade dollars. On the other hand, if Prop 1A, so if that's a decision, we have to go back for the legislature after some delay in 2022, and we'd have to deal with the risk of any compromised federal funding if we've further slowed the program. On the other hand, if 1A is approved, there are key decisions that will come up this fall that we'll bring to the board and want to be consulting and discussing with the legislature as we move ahead. Obviously, we'll have a better way to assess the likelihood of future federal funding. Again, the Build Back Better proposal from the Biden administration is forthcoming now. I think we will know much about that between now and the budget, the adoption of the next budget here in California. We want to consider the award of the track and systems contract so we can get the track laid. That again, you guys will be informed in late June, early July on what those look like, and come back for a decision in September. We will be coming back to the board, as I mentioned in a previous board meeting, for the re-procurement of our rail delivery partner contract, and that is something we would continue to move forward on. We do advance the preliminary engineering work on Merced to Bakersfield for those extensions. This is one area of investment that the peer review group has suggested we do the work beyond the 119, but the earlier we get started on understanding what the challenge is and what the configuration and what the right-of-way and other needs will be getting to the Bakersfield and Merced sections, the better. So we do want to start that work. And of course, we'll start a conversation about how to move forward on train set procurements. Next piece. Again, I already said this, but Q3 of this year, the single or double track option will be before you with informed bids from the bidders, and we will make a decision after consultation with the legislature during that time. Key decisions for spring of 2022. Again, if we're moving forward on this, we want to look at a train set procurement, both for testing trains in the system on the 119 and ultimately to get into operations beyond that. We'll be looking at awarding a new RDP contract as we've gone through the re-procurement RFP process this year into next. And we'll want to consider the starting of procurement, the design and geotech work on the tunnel elements of this program, both the Madera to San Jose stretch and the Bakersfield to Palmdale stretch. And again, at the legislative hearings, the peer review group leader, Lou Thompson, the chair of that group, indicated to the legislature that we can't do enough geotech work early enough on these segments. It's important for the board members to know that about half of the costs of building the entire system from San Francisco to LA and Anaheim is in these segments where tunnels exist. So the more we can learn about that and the more we can advance that work as soon as we finish the environmental, the better. Next part. Obviously, we move on into the later parts of 2022, and we really get a sense not only of what federal funding has been provided, but whether we have a shot at achieving that, whether there's awards that will be available to this program. If there's a couple of options here, one, there's significant federal funding available. Next piece. And that would allow us to look at other options like, again, is that the right time to double track? Again, we could do that sooner, but if we know there's more federal funds, that's an option to do that sooner, looking at additional train sets, or depending on the size and scope of available federal funding, advance towards construction on the additional segments outside of the Central Valley process and consistent with our stage gate process. If there's no immediate federal funding on the horizon, we complete the CVS with the electrified track. We meet all of our ARA commitments, which we have with the federal government right now, and we continue to focus on value engineering to achieve the Merced to Bakersfield interim high-speed rail service that we can fund with existing dollars. And so these are sort of the way this plays out as we see it going forward. Next slide. This is a little bit busy. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but members, you all have this slide. The point of this slide is to really say on the left side of the column here, under the new business plan, we estimate we have between 21 and 23 billion dollars between now and 2030. With the 18.2 of that, we clearly move forward on the finishing all of our commitments to the federal government, all of our bookend commitments, getting the environmental work done. This just lays out how we would pursue and move forward on each of those elements. And each of the sort of brownish, purplish color boxes there are where we have opportunity to, in the next couple of years, as we go through this, do this in a methodical, stage gate process and build into that consultation with policymakers and legislators before we make next determinations on program moves. And that's what this is really designed to show, that along the step of the way, there's opportunity to discuss with policymakers before we award next contracts. But awarding these next contracts will enable the work to go forward. So again, as you work down that side of the $18.2 billion budget, 15.6 is really about making sure all of our ARA needs are done. The environmental documents are, and bookend projects in Southern Northern California are the 1.3 billion added onto that, doing early design for Merced to Bakersfield, considering train set procurements, getting through all of these things between now and say our project update report to the legislature in 2023. This is how we can do this, move this along, do it with consultation. And then at the end of this, toward the bottom, as you're into the beginning of 2023, we have that $3.5 to $4.8 billion we expect to have left for the work to actually move into construction on the Merced and Bakersfield elements under that timeline. So again, this is designed to lay out how we'd go forward in a methodical way and building in time for important consultation.
Brian, where are these slides located?
This was in the background documents that we sent to you guys it's in the PowerPoint, it's in the back end of the PowerPoint presentation. And that is in this.
It's past all those folded pages, Martha.
Past all the folded pages? Okay, because I'm going through all the folded pages right now. And it's somewhere around here. Oh, Lord, doesn't even have.
You know what, Martha, if you, let me say, if you don't have this, I'll get you the PowerPoint to it. Frank's, I know Frank's is in there. If the entirety of mine is not, I want to get that to you. I apologize for that. But these slides are again, something that I wanted to add to this presentation to lay out sort of the decision tree and how it would work going forward with some of the
and things. That's why I think I would love to see them, because it's very good information. I'm trying to find it here in this.
If you don't have, I will get them to you today. In fact, all the board members, I'll make sure you have them today if you don't.
Yeah, Brian, I don't have them either.
Okay.
I don't have this particular slide, Brian.
Okay, I think by the time we sent out the documents, I think I may have added this later. I was trying to work on a decision tree that made some sense, and so I wanted to work it in here. But again, I'll get it to all the board members today.
Thank you.
Sure.
Go ahead, Brian.
Last slide, please. Again, just a snapshot of some of the things that are up and coming over the next 12 to 15 months on this that we articulate in the business plan. Again, we'll work with the legislature and others on appropriating 1A funds to complete the construction work. We're looking at our environmental clearances this year for Bakersfield to Palmdale, Burbank to Los Angeles. We're looking at awarding a track and systems contract so that work can commence in 22. Complete negotiations with the FRA on the grant schedule and FY10 funding. We're hoping to award some contracts for the advanced design work for the Merced and Bakersfield extensions, and continue to make important progress on the Central Valley construction segment. All of that to be updated to the board monthly. And then, suddenly we're less than a year away from our 2022 business plan and not very far away from our 2023 project update report. So there are many opportunities for this to lead nicely into the reports and updates that we have coming up. So with that, Mr. Chairman, thank you for your indulgence. I know it was a long presentation. I will get any slides that people didn't have in their packets to them today.
Okay, thank you, Brian.
Happy to answer.
Mr. Chairman, could I make a motion to adopt the revised 2020 business plan?
I'd like to ask a question first.
Sure.
Going back to the
Second.
Before that, if we've got a motion, do we have a second, and then we can have the discussion? Is there a second to the motion?
Yes, I second it.
Thank you. We got a motion and a second. Ernie, let's go ahead with your question.
Yep. Can I go back to the slide presentation, one of the first slides, where you talked about the legislature either denying or approving the Prop 1A money?
Sure. Can we pull that back up? I don't have it in front of me. Justin, can you pull that back up? It's the third to the last slide. There you go.
There you go. Thank you.
Go back. One more back. There you go.
There you go. So the first step is going to be getting approval from the legislature for either denying or approving. And if they approve it, then they would more than likely then provide the $4.2 billion that would be obligated through Prop 1A, correct?
Yes.
Now, the legislative analysts and the peer review group both acknowledge the successes of our program as well as the shortcomings. But but they talked about moving forward beyond the 119R agreement. And what if we approved the business plan up to that point, went to the legislature with a number that would say we can complete this section, and then waiting for the Biden administration, hopefully within the next 2 months, will allocate monies through their infrastructure program, dollars to California. And with that, it would then give us an opportunity to plan out our future relative to our promise to the stakeholders, which are the voters that voted for high-speed rail and those that voted against it. But we owe an obligation to them to provide them a world-class high-speed rail system. I think that with the dollars that the federal government would allocate, would be able to provide us an opportunity to plan out our future and really meet that challenge of providing a world-class system. I mean, what would that mean to the rest of what we're doing?
Well, we're required under the law to lay out the vision and the next steps for how we're going to move this program forward. And we are required to do it under the estimation of the constraints of the budget that we think we have. So the approach that we've taken here, what we're laying out in the program, is with the revenue that we know we have available in terms of estimates of the current funding sources that we have, what we can do with that. And that's what we've laid out here. Now, I've been clear in every hearing I've been in that there's no doubt that if we get more federal money, we can do more. We can extend to other places. And that's why our update reports to the legislature are annual. But I feel like our job and our what we're required to do is lay out what it is we propose to do with the revenues that are dedicated to this program. And so that's what we're laying out here. I know there will be, I understand we're going to have budget negotiations with the legislature and the Newsom administration, and we'll participate in that and see what happens. And I'm certainly mindful that not all things are clear from where other external funds may come from. But I think what we're tasked to do here is lay out what we would do with the funding that we expect to have, not assuming any additional more federal money. And that's what we're laying out in this business plan. And ultimately, I think the conversations in the legislature will likely be made easier when we know whether there's other state or federal dollars available for broader infrastructure. And so you're right, we have to see that. But I think the adoption of the business plan today and the vision that we're laying out with the funding that we expect to have does not disrupt what will be the future conversations we'll have in the budget cycle. And those determinations will be made.
Thank you, Brian. Ernie, anything else?
No.
Okay, any other questions?
I have some questions.
Yes, Martha, please.
But I saw the hand raised for Lynn Schenk and Henry
I'm sorry,
Pereira.
I didn't. Lynn's is raised. Lynn, do you want to let Martha go?
Yeah, no, that was for my previous comment. Thank you.
Okay, Martha, you're up.
Okay. Well, the question that I have is, I guess I'm getting a little bit confused here because I go back to this chart on page 82 of the business plan, Brian, The chart is Exhibit 5.0. And it basically talks about how much do we have in terms of currently available funds and how much do we have in terms of total authorized funds. Now, in terms of currently available funds, especially the $2.8 billion that are remaining, can you tell me that how are we going to spend that $2.8 billion?
Yes, we're going to spend down some of those dollars on the activities that we now have underway. We're virtually out of bond dollars today. So we'll be spending down off of that funding on mostly cap and trade, I think, there on the activities that we have going forward. And our expectation is that the investment of that, last year, while it's true we have been underspending on an annualized basis, last year we hit a record high in what we spent on this program. And we expect as more and more construction sites open, our path on expenditure and our rate on expenditure will increase. And so
does the rate of expenditure actually include actual construction costs, or are these change orders for no additional construction?
We can have we can, should, and will have a conversation about change orders and how they affect this program. But as we are still defining the scope of the original contracts, certainly change orders are part of construction contracts going forward, and the construction work.
All right. So the 2.8. I'm sorry. Go right ahead, Brian. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm going to invite Brian Annis to jump in here, but let me just say, my sense is that the 2.8 is mostly in the cap and trade area. If that's the revenue that we have, and we are spending that on all elements of the enterprise going forward as we are at the end of our available bond dollars. Brian, do you want to jump in on that?
So in order for us to finish the Central Valley segment,
yes,
we not only have to spend the 2.8 billion that we have remaining, plus we need an additional allocation of Prop 1A funds, correct?
Yes, because we're not just spending on construction, we're spending on environmental, we're spending on bookend projects in LA and the Bay Area.
And you need all the 4.2 billion all at once?
Well, what we need is we certainly need an infusion of the bond dollars to keep the construction work going in the valley on a reasonable pace, because our expectation is we run out of cap and trade dollars in the early part of 2022. And if we don't have anything, and that's the next budget year, and if we don't have anything available, we slow down or stop work.
Brian, I have a lot of questions. I don't know if you can see these pages and pages of questions, but
I'm here as long as you need me to be.
No, but I understand that we have to go into closed session, and I'm very, cognizant of everyone's, time, but I want to get to yes. I want to vote yes for this. And I respectfully request of you and of everybody who has far more experience than me to help me get to yes. But right now, maybe I'm viewing this as too much as a regular common person. I'm not an expert in transportation. And that is that if I have to do my budget, in terms of my assets and liabilities, and what do I foresee as future costs, and what do I foresee as reasonable money coming in, I frankly, I feel, at least that's my conservative nature as in terms of budgeting, that a lot of the assumptions of this budget rest on a lot of speculation. I think the cap and trade dollars are very speculative. And because they're speculative, you cannot bond against it, frankly. Unless you're going to pay a high interest rate. And obviously the money that hopefully we will get from the Biden administration, it's also speculative right now. So I'm just wondering, and, excuse me for thinking out of the box, but is it possible to have maybe 3 different budget scenarios? This budget scenario that you have presented, in my opinion, is very rosy. Okay, that's fair. You're the point guy in this one, and you're going to push your most rosy scenario. But can you help me come up with maybe a skinny budget, a budget that only meets what we need to meet pursuant to the ARA obligations. And I'm basically being guided by the letter that's in page 157 of your business plan by the peer review group. And that is that maybe we ought to just do enough to meet our obligations and then kind of see, first of all, in terms of time, that will give us time to get a sense as to what the legislature will do, but more importantly, what the Biden administration will do. And so I would love to see, a budget scenario that besides yours, it's also a budget scenario that's very skinny, that only meets our obligations and whatever obligations we also have, as well as also a budget scenario that basically it's like includes worst case scenario assumptions. I'm the kind of person that I want to see the good, the bad, and the ugly. Your budget is very good, but I don't agree with its assumptions. But I also want to see something that's kind of like, okay, maybe a skinny version of it, something that will meet our obligations. It buys us time to find out what Biden is going to do, as well as the legislature. And then the other budget I would love to see is the ugly, the worst case scenario. What if none of this stuff materializes? What if what if the feds don't materialize? What if cap and trade doesn't materialize? And I know, I don't want to be throwing rocks at your work product, but I'm afraid. I mean, it just really, really frightens me because this is billions of dollars.
So let me first start by just saying that that's exactly what this business plan does. We estimate the low end of what cap and trade will look like, as well as the high end of what cap and trade will look like. Our base cap and trade estimate ties very well to the history of cap and trade since the AB 398 bill was put into place in terms of a medium scenario for getting funding of cap and trade. On page 92 of the business plan, there is a chart that breaks out each segment of the kind of work and what it will cost to do various parts of this. The one thing I want to say to you that is just something that the peer review group, I, and the LAO all agree on. The funding for the high-speed rail program should be more stable. It should be more secure. In each of the last 3 business plans I put out, we have asked the legislature to consider extending cap and trade, making it financeable, and making sure that we have a floor that we can finance against to make sure that it's more stable. They have not taken those actions yet, and I understand why. I think it's a good idea to wait and see what the federal government part looks like. But I also say this, there's nothing in our proposal on the Bakersfield to Merced part or completing any of the interim parts that we must complete before we get there that relies on new federal money. Nothing. The new federal money for us would certainly assure us maybe of doing a double track earlier, and it would help us grow out of the valley and do more extending into the valley. But what we have here, what we've estimated here, and believe me, I'm at the front of the line of the guy that would say, I wish our state commitments to this were more solid. But the cap and trade money, notwithstanding, I mean, we just lived through, years of unstable funding, the Trump administration, and a global pandemic. And we are still seeing our cap and trade dollars coming in at about our middle base case estimate. And we have a new administration that, at least for the next 4 years, is certainly not going to do us harm. They're certainly not going to do us harm. And they may even do us great benefit. And we're all going to be informed by that. So I do think we lay out the various scenarios here on how much each element costs. I can't do anything different about our estimate of revenues because cap and trade is what it is. It's locked in until 2030. We get 25% of what that looks like. Our worst, middle, and base case and high-end scenarios are informed by what the Department of Finance wants us to use. And that's what we've brought to this business plan. I understand there are folks who want us to just do the 119 and stop. And I just want to say something about that. I think if we just do the 119 and stop, you will ensure that we will spend more and it will cost more to advance beyond the 119. And I think that is bad policy. I also think if we just do the 119 and consider putting traditional train sets on that, then you also lose important benefits of expanded service, more frequencies, a united station where all trains will meet in Merced, and improved ridership in that region. So I do think we lay out based on our scenarios what these things look like, and we do cost this out based on the segments, what we have to do to meet ARA and what we want to do beyond that. And so I don't think I would change anything. And I'm the first to admit part of this is the difficulty here. And again, the peer review group says this at every legislative hearing. This program needs more stable funding over the long term. They say it every time, and I could not agree with them more. There's two things that I committed to when I got here. One is make sure our performance and our advancement of work is better so we can have a good argument for more state funding. And now that the Biden administration is here, I'd like us to see what federal money might be on the table before we talk about more state money. And so,
Well, yeah, that would be,
Martha, yeah, go ahead. I just wanted to make sure you got the opportunity to ask whatever other questions.
I have some more questions, just two more questions, please,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman. First of all, I don't think people are saying just do 119 miles and stop. I think what people are saying, do 119 miles and pause.
Yeah.
And reflect. Yeah. And that's the language taken word by word by the peer review group, you know? And I don't think there's nothing wrong with pausing and reflecting to kind of get a sense of where we are at, you know? I mean, as a matter of fact, when you were talking about something earlier, you said, you know, something about, I forgot what it was, but what I want to tell you is this, basically using your own words, it wasn't about the business plan, but can we bring back this business plan when we know more? You know, and obviously, you know, you're not going to do that, you know, but so let's just be clear. The 119 miles is not 119 and stop. It's 119 and pause, number one. Number two.
Yeah, let me make one mention to what you just said. There are unknowns that are in the near future for us right now. We don't know what the legislature is going to do, and we don't know what the Biden administration is going to do. I suspect as a result of both of those activities, and the one with the legislature is going to be based upon the governor and the legislature in the revise. I think that there's every likelihood that when we have that sort of clarity, this board is likely going to be asking Brian and his team to look at various other things as a result of having a firmer understanding of what our financing commitments are as a result of what happens out of Washington and what happens in the legislature. So I don't think that ever this board should think that we don't have the ability to go to management and make requests for information, and from that information make decisions, because that's the job that we have.
So you're saying that if we vote for this now, and if the world changes, we can come back to management and say, hey, give us an alternative budget. Are you saying that, Mr. Chairman?
What I'm saying is that it's hard to plan when you absolutely don't know what your budget is. We only know what has been forecast, as Brian was just saying a moment ago. What's forecast that we have to go forward? We don't know where that assumes also right now that the legislature releases $4.2 billion. Right. We don't know if they're doing that. So I think that it's fair to say that if we wouldn't even have to be going to management would be coming to us if the financing availability for this project, the capital funds available, changed dramatically from what we've got now. There's no question we're going to have to be looking at something.
Then my last question is, Brian, and it's just my concern over the fact that we are restricted by the no operating subsidies language in the act. And I know that we're trying to lease our operations as well as the train tracks. I just want to make sure that when that real MOU that's legally binding, not a voluntary memorandum of understanding, but legally binding, when that happens, I really, really do hope that we take advice of counsel, including outside counsel, in order to make sure that it's legally tight. Because I wouldn't want the public to think that we are doing this as a way to get around the statute in terms of avoiding, the operating subsidy. And the best way to do that is by making sure that we have no control over anything that happens with the lessee-lessor relationship, I mean, not even approving anything, you know, we should just be totally independent of it. So that's it, and no
I
further
just,
questions.
I do not, I just want to say that I have no disagreement with what you just said.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, Lynn.
Well, Andre has been waiting
Oh,
patiently.
I'm
so
sorry. I don't see his.
let him speak, and then I
No,
will.
no, go ahead, Lynn. I'll pass. Go ahead. I'll come back.
Yeah, I apologize. I don't, all
I have
of
I
you,
have a list.
all of your
I
pictures.
have
Okay,
I
well,
have a
mine is
list to go
short.
through.
Mine is short. And I just want to
Yeah.
say that the first iteration of the business plan, I found it very hard to support. It was very difficult to get through this ream of the amendments and changes. Really hard, took a lot of time, but I think I slogged through it. And everything Martha has been saying is so valuable to advance the discussion and what we need to be thinking about and what Ernie has been saying. But I'm supporting it for the reason that it is a plan. It is not, it's our.
Lynn, you just froze.
Yeah.
Oh.
There you go. You're back now.
My back. Okay, sorry. Well, again, it is a point in time now. Who knows? We may be showered with federal money. That will change things. We may find that we're not showered with federal money. It may require even more of a rollback. And as you pointed out, Tom, we don't know what the legislature is going to do, but we've got to start somewhere. And so for me, this is the starting point. It is an organic product. It is not cast in concrete for the future as new developments arise. And so again, I say I have heartburn on single track. I have a lot of heartburn that San Diego is never mentioned, even in the future. We did have one map, Brian, if you recall at our last meeting, that I said, oh, it's got Sacramento and San Diego. Can we at least use that map going forward? Because it's like out of sight, out of mind forever. But given all that is going on, this stew of the problems and issues that we've confronted, some in our control, mostly not, I will be voting for this. And knowing that we will all be keeping an eye on what's happening in Washington, in Sacramento, and being able to come back and bring our best thinking to what we do going forward.
Thank you, Lynn. Andre?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Brian, and the rest of the members for really making it a very interesting discussion. I have a few issues with the plan as it stands. One is future cost implications. I think even with the risk that's been identified and the contingency levels that have been identified and proposed in the business plan, I'm concerned that based on prior history and the fact that we have at least 3 more years remaining in construction until substantial completion, that the costs will continue to increase. And I think we need to account for that a little bit more carefully. Aside from management and risk management and things of that nature, I think we need to be cognizant of the fact that cost is going to go up beyond the numbers that we have, especially when the contractors begin to submit claims after construction completion. I understand staff disagrees with a lot of the letters that have been sent by the contractors, but I think the contractors are laying out a path forward for potential negotiation and potential settlements that are not necessarily accounted for in the budgets for the project. Having said that, I think that brings in a constraint in terms of where the money will be spent. So I think we need to focus on that a little bit. I don't think the levels that have been discussed in the business plans are appropriate from my standpoint, because they really don't address the claims or potential claims that the contractors may come in after the fact, even though we're putting contingency on the side. I see the contingency being expended on a regular basis, so that I don't know how much of the contingency will really remain after 3 years. And that's assuming the 3 years stands and we don't have any other delays. We don't know what the pandemic is going to do, or whether there's another cycle or anything else that may cause additional costs. My second issue, which is really the most critical one, is the operations and the MOU leasing the services, down the line. I think the MOU needs to be in place now. I don't think a letter of intent suffices to really to lay out the risks for the state and what the state exposure is going to be for operations of that line. Any budgets that really have to be identified need to be identified and negotiated with the legislature as we move forward. We do need to set up a funding source to keep this project moving, whether it's for subsidies or anything else. I'm not really sure where that money is going to come from if we don't really highlight it and make sure there is mechanism through the legislature, through laws that will secure that money, because it will be required. It'll be right off the top of any other program that money will come from. So that MOU needs to be done now, not tomorrow, not next week, not next year. It has to be done before we really agree on a path moving forward, because everything is related to it. We talked about reliability of train service. We talked about passenger numbers. We talked about revenue. All that is really related to that MOU. And if we don't have a solid MOU that is clear, that identifies all the roles and responsibilities and who's responsible for the risks of the service not really attaining the numbers that we've predicted, then there is a big financial implication to the state. Third, I think we do need to engage with the legislature and the governor's office right now to start talking about how we fund this project moving forward. I don't think we need to wait for the federal government. Personally, I think we need to do it at the state level. If there is really a commitment to keep this project moving, then everybody needs to step up and put that money source and money levels in place so this project can move forward. If there's no commitment, then we need to figure out what we're going to do with what we have right now. So that's a critical point, and that's not really addressed in the business plan either. I think we need to look at our commitments to the 119-mile segment. Yes, it's not necessarily the end of the line, but that is the first priority, and that's the highest priority that needs to be done. And finally, we do have a business plan proposal that is supposed to be done or submitted to the legislature of May 22, which means that we need to start working on a new business plan here very soon. And I think that business plan can bring in the federal piece and the state piece and everything else. And this business plan that is in front of us today really needs to focus on what we have currently in place and how we're going to deal with it. And I will stop here. And
thanks, Andre. I think that the May 22nd, I think is the one you're referring to, would be the project update report.
That's a business plan.
Say what?
Business plan.
It's the business
It's a business plan.
Oh, for next year, for 22?
Yeah,
the project, absolutely. I'm sorry, I missed the 22.
The project update report was due this year, but it was waived.
That's
for
right.
This business plan.
That's right. Yeah, I didn't.
So there are a lot of issues from my perspective that really are not resolved to my satisfaction. I'll just lay it out like that, and I will stop.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other questions? Hearing none, we have a motion. And
Mr. Chair, I had my hand raised. Yeah, I would just say briefly, I would just, for time's sake, associate myself with the remarks of Director Shank in particular, and don't need to repeat much of what she said, but I did think that her remarks sort of encapsulated where I stand also with respect to the plan But I also did want to add that, and this was referenced in the public comment from many of those who spoke related to the issues of Wasco, that I did meet with the mayor there. I wanted to publicly acknowledge that for the board and for transparency that I did visit that site. Just want to say that as we move forward as a project, I think it's very important for us to show other communities that will ultimately be impacted that we are good stewards of all of those relationships. I think the resolving the Wasco situation will be an indication of that. And I know that there's a commitment of not just myself, but other board members, as well as the staff. I've had a chance to have a conversation with Mr. Kelly about this. So I know that there's a commitment to resolving that situation in particular and show that we are prudent, good stewards of those relationships. So with that, I would also just say that for those reasons, I will be supporting moving forward with the plan today.
Thank you, Director Williams. And so no other questions. I also, as you would probably recognize, I'm also supporting this as a step in moving forward into an area in the next few months when we're going to really find out what resources are in front of us and what are not. And with each of the comments you've made, each of you, they're all a part of the decision-making process as we go forward. And there wasn't one question that wasn't both well thought out of and were things that each of us should be thinking about. So with all of that, I'm going to ask the secretary to call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Schenk?
Yes.
Chair Richards?
Yes.
Director Camacho?
No.
Vice Chair Miller?
Yes.
Director Perea?
Yes.
Director Guillemette?
Yes.
Director Escutia?
No.
Director Boutros?
No.
Director Williams?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, the motion carries.
All right, thank you, Mo. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. And thank you, CEO Kelly, for the reports. I'm going to pass on finance and audit today in interest of getting us to our closed session. And so with that, ladies and gentlemen, we're now going to
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
The CEO report.
I apologize. I just have a brief update on the CEO report.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'd like to share.
You told me you were going to make it brief, and I thought that meant nothing.
We heard a lot of public comment today from folks at Wasco, and I do want to report to the whole board on the status of the development there that I think is important. And I'm certainly disappointed that nobody who called in mentioned the advancement that we're making on the issue. And that is that, you know, first of all, when the entirety of the issue came up about demolishing the old farm worker housing area in Wasco, it's important to note that we went back and looked at what our commitments were and are in the development of this project, what mitigation measures we put in place at that time. Initially, we had offered a sound wall, which was back in 2015 and 16, denied in favor of helping build new farm worker housing, which we applied $10 million to, have finished that construction, and for the farm workers are in the new housing in Wasco that we helped pay for. The issue of demolition was never discussed or never part of that initial process. Now, all of that said, I do want to say this. I have also visited the site. I have spent time with the mayor and the city staff down there. And I do think, because we have worked continuous with the community of Wasco, that we do want to be helpful in trying to resolve the issue of the blighted former farm worker housing issue in that area. So we did, just at the end of last week, move forward with a federal grant application that we have now submitted, an infra grant, to both complete some grade separation work on Route 46 in Wasco and use $9.4 million of that grant request to fund the demolition of the farm worker housing. We just sent that grant application in. We expect, I'm told, that awards will be made. We'll understand what awards were made by the end of April. And so this is a way, I think, for us to show leadership on this and to pursue funding for this that doesn't come directly out of our budget, but is money that we would pursue to apply to get that work done. And so I'm pleased that in a very short window, the team here at the authority put together the grant application, worked closely with the transportation agency. We have letters of support for that grant application from the mayor of Wasco and from the assembly member and the state senator representing Wasco. So I'm very pleased that we've done this work, and we'll see how this goes. But I think it's important for all of you to know that whether or not it's strictly our fiscal obligation, it is something that we want to be cooperative in getting done, and we're trying to look under every pillow, cushion, and everything else to find dollars to complete that work. So I just wanted to update you all on that.
So once demolition happens, what's going to be built?
No,
that's up to the city of Wasco. They want that site demolished now, and I think they've zoned it for industrial use.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much for all of that, Brian.
Thank you.
Right.
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Anything else to your report?
No. No.
Okay. All right. Thanks. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're now going to go into closed session. After the closed session, which I expect to be somewhat in advance or longer than 1 hour, we will come back and report to the public before adjourning the meeting. So,
Tom,
uh-huh.
Could we have, like a 7-8 minute recess here?
1:30.
1:30. Good. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. We'll see all the members on the closed session at 1:30. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back to report after the closed session in probably about 2:30, about 2:45 or so.
Yeah, and just a reminder that everybody should get into the closed session on the separate.
Right. Okay. Since you heard, I didn't know we were live yet. I just wanted to make sure that if there was anybody on board that we got you live, but since you are already, this is Tom Richards. I have just left the closed session. The closed session is being continued. It is going to be continued until Monday at 2:45 p.m. That's Monday, March 29th. So I wanted to let you know that we are going to continue today's High-Speed Rail Authority Board meeting until Monday at 2:45, at which time I will, with our people, our secretary and IT staff, we'll open the public session. And the intention then we will go back in with the continued meeting in closed session. After that continuation and the completion of that meeting on the 29th, I will then come back and report to the public. With that, will conclude today's business, subject to that continuation on Monday, March 29th at 2:45. And the information that you may need for joining us will be available on the website. And I do not anticipate at this point, there's no new public information or agenda, no public agenda, and therefore there may not be an opportunity for any public comment. I don't have the final answer for that until Monday, but if it is appropriate to have public comment, we will let you know on Monday when we reconvene from this continuation of today, and let you know that there either will or will not be an opportunity for public comment. With that, we will now continue this meeting until Monday the 29th at 2:45. Thank you for being with us. And until Monday, have a good weekend. High-Speed Rail Authority Board of Directors meeting. We apologize for the short delay this afternoon. We found ourselves trying to swim and we weren't in the stream, so we're back with you. The purpose of the continuation of the meeting of the 25th was to go back into closed session. We did not finish all of the work that we had in closed session on the 25th. So as I mentioned at the end of the meeting on the 25th. We would be back this afternoon to go back into closed session. After the closed session, I'll return and report anything that the board may have from that closed session. With that, thank you for being with us this afternoon. We'll be back to you hopefully in about 1 hour. Until then, we will now go into closed session, and I'll be back. Thank you. Nothing to report out of that closed session, but I just wanted to advise all of you that we are going to be continuing this meeting. The meeting will now be on April the 8th. That's next week from Thursday at 11 a.m. At 11 a.m. on April the 8th, we are continuing our board meeting from March the 25th of 2021 now to April the 8th at 11 a.m. As a result of today's closed session, I will let you know, I am letting you know that the board has nothing to report at this time. So thank you all very much for your patience, and have a good week. Be safe, and we will talk with you again on April the 8th. Good day. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is the continuation of the March 25th, 2021 California High-Speed Rail Authority's Board of Directors meeting. Today, we have no public agenda. And as you may recall, for those of you who've been with us before, the public comment for the March 25th meeting was had on received on March the 25th. Today's business is to go back into closed session, which we will do momentarily. The expectation today for those of you who wish to stay with us, we'll try to complete our work today by about noon, at which time I will come back and rejoin you with any report that the board may have for the public. With that being stated, thank you for joining us this morning, and we'll be back shortly.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Tom Richards. I'm on an audio feed now. I apologize for that, but I wanted to report that the Board of Directors of the California High-Speed Rail Authority has completed its closed session. We do not have anything to report out to the public. That will conclude the continuation of our meeting of March 25th, 2021. Thank you for being with us. Have a good weekend and be safe. Good day.